This episode of Mikey on Mute is brought to you by Little Jerk Society. Little Jerk Society is a clothing company fueled by the raw energy of creative rebellion, celebrating those who march to the beat of their own drum. They care deeply about mental health and believe in a world where everyone can thrive, regardless of their challenges. Use promo code MikeyOnMute to save 15% on your order at littlejerkclothing.com. Again, that's littlejerkclothing.com. And remember, use promo code MikeyOnMute, all one word, to save yourself 15%. Go off and make a change. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mikey on Mute. As always, I'm Mikey, coming off mute to tell you my mental health story, talk with others about their journeys, and really get that conversation going. Let's make it less taboo to talk about mental health. Today is episode 12, and it's a special Ask Me Anything episode. I asked on the different social medias on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, and I said, hey, what are some questions you want answered? What are some things I haven't spoken about on the podcast that you want to know? Do you have a question for me personally that you want answered? And I appreciate all the comments and messages and everything that came through. You guys really are incredible. Speaking of incredible people, before I get to Ask Me Anything, I need to take time to give some really special shout outs, some really high mentions to people that have meant a lot to me. When I started this a few months back, I definitely knew I had to network and get out there and meet people, virtually and everything like that. What I wasn't expecting is how quickly I amassed this group that supports me in a way I can't thank you guys enough for. The likes, the shares, the comments, the recommendations, the conversations I've been able to have with these creators and these podcasters and these accounts. It means so much to me. I can't even say it with a straight face. I feel a lot of emotions right now for it. I have a few special ones I want to mention here. First, I want to talk to you about the Tank. That's right, from the podcast, the Truth Tank, I need to talk to you about the Tank, who is one of the first podcasters I ever connected with, especially after joining Instagram. If you love an alternative perspective on history, if you love mystery, conspiracies and conspiracy theories, UFOs, and all things crazy like that, you are going to love the Truth Tank. Find him on my Instagram, follow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Honestly, the Truth Tank has been so amazing to talk to, and Tank, I can't thank you enough for being there when I need to just speak things out. You're always sharing my stories onto your story, and it means more than I can tell you. Next, I really need to shout out to the Old and the Beautiful podcast. Here we have two incredible people in Wes and Jen, who are a married couple just shooting the shit about movies and more. They gave a very heartfelt, unexpected shout out on one of their last episodes that really meant the world to me. I told them that I had to basically double take on my phone when I heard it because it caught me off guard. And it really is incredible. I didn't think that I was reaching certain people. I knew that there was support and likes and things like that, but to hear them speak about me in the way they did, it really showed me that there's people out there that strongly connect with what I'm trying to do and the message I'm trying to get across. Please check out the Old and the Beautiful podcast. You will not be disappointed. You can find them on my Instagram, as always. Otherwise, search up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everything like that. They have a Facebook page. If you're following my Facebook page, I shared theirs out. Please go connect with them. Thirdly, I want to talk to you about Thick Thighs and Creepy Vibes. All things true crime and extra spooky. Brought to you by Avery and Mandy. These two amazing individuals also gave a shout out to the Mikey on Mute podcast on one of their latest episodes. Warmed my heart. I had a really great conversation on Instagram, and these are people that not only bring you amazing true crime shows, which I love. I'm a huge fan of true crime. Just because I do a mental health podcast doesn't mean that's the only ones I listen to. I love true crime, and these two are incredible at it. The chemistry of these two hosts is impeccable. You will not find a more entertaining true crime podcast on this side of things. So please go find them on my Instagram. They're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, TikTok. You can find them everywhere. It's Thick Thighs and Creepy Vibes. Some honorable mentions to others that have supported me. Sam at You Mean a Podcast. Sarah at Rough Edges Podcast. Will Craig at Mental Health with Will. The Chad, Matt, and Bobs over at Cheers, Big Ears. The Kings of Chaos Podcast. Just had a great conversation with them. Chillworthy. First and 30 Pod. Talk with Tay Podcast. Flat Tire Andy. And of course, Recovery Revolution. These are just some of the people I've made connections with over on Instagram and other formats. Huge, huge support system. I can't thank them enough. Please go follow them, go like them, share them, listen to their podcasts. These are all ones that are in my rotation, and they need to be in yours. All right, now that we got our shout-outs out for the week, let's get to the main part of the episode here. Ask Me Anything. Again, I asked you guys on social media, and so I appreciate the responses. Our first question here comes from a comment on Instagram. If you want the Instagram, if you're listening and you're not following, it's Mikey_on_mute_podcast. I'm pretty active on there, so definitely follow that. But this first one comes from You, Me, and a Podcast. I just shouted out Sam on the honorable mentions here. They say, can we collaborate one day for an episode? Absolutely. I would love nothing more. I'm actively searching for other people to have these kind of conversations with, collaborations, however we can make it happen. I have a great list of people that are very, very interested. Now I need to organize and schedule and find time. I know it's a busy time, but absolutely, You Mean a Podcast and Mikey on Mute Podcast, we are 100% collaborating. Coming up soon, I promise you that. Our next question comes again from an Instagram follower, Mikey Livid. They say, do you believe in ghosts? Why or why not? Well, Mikey, from one Mikey to another, I told you on Instagram, I love the name connection. It's great. You've been a big supporter as well. Do I believe in ghosts? Absolutely, I do. I believe that there are things that we can't explain with science, and I'm a big believer in science. There are some things that we just can't explain. There are too many circumstances and examples out there of things that happen that cannot be figured out within this mortal world of ours. And just some personal experiences where I felt connected to people that have passed on, yet I've felt them, seen them, had some kind of interaction. I've spoken before about how when I go to visit my mom at the graveyard and I go to leave, my car the last time wouldn't start. Summer day, it's nice out, there's no reason not to. The first couple pushes would not start, and then it started right up. I feel like that was my mom messing with me, and that was the time I was able to introduce my wife to my mom, and she got to see a little bit of that humor. And so, yeah, absolutely, I'm 100% in for believing. Mikey Livid had a second question. What question are you afraid to answer? I don't know if there's a question I'm afraid to answer. There are definitely topics that are a bit off limit currently. It may be a trauma or trigger that I haven't worked through yet, and I don't feel comfortable sharing on the podcast. So if a question like that comes up, I won't answer it, but it's not due to being afraid. It's more so I want to make sure that I'm in the right headspace to answer it. One, so that way it doesn't affect me in a negative way. And two, so that way I can give you the best, most accurate answer without my mind trying to go a million different directions to cover that up. So again, Mikey Livid, appreciate your questions. Another question from Instagram. We have, I really hope I don't butcher this name, Rena Friedman Watts from the Better Call Daddy podcast. Again, great supporter. Had some talks recently. Very excited to continue that relationship as well. Rena's question is, what's your relationship like with your dad? Seems like a valid question coming from somebody with a Better Call Daddy podcast. So, my relationship with my dad, it used to be very strained. From when I was about 15 or 16, when my parents' separation happened and I discovered some things I didn't want to about that whole relationship. My relationship with my dad really got strained from there for quite some time. We didn't really speak very much unless it was specifically for, my sons and him to get some kind of interaction because I wasn't going to withhold them from him, but I wasn't actively making, an effort to connect with them for at least a decade. It was a very long time that I didn't speak to him. In the last few years, my dad and I have reconnected on such a great level. We both took time to sit down and take some accountability. He was able to take accountability for things he didn't understand that had affected me and could get some perspective from my side. I was able to take accountability for, understanding that wasn't my relationship. Their marriage was not my relationship, and I didn't know everything that had gone on. And so I was able to go, okay, maybe I unfairly thought negatively of my father for quite some time without asking for more information. We had these talks. They were heavy talks. They weren't easy talks, but it got better, slowly over time here. We got to a point now that a few years ago when my dad got remarried, I was his best man. It meant so much to me to stand up there and be the best man. And then this past fall, my dad was the best man for my wedding. We have a great relationship. I don't see him as much because he did move out of state within the last year and a half, but I still try to make sure we find time to text, FaceTime when we can. Could always do more. Really want to get out to the part of the country he's in at some point and do a family vacation. So, Rena, thanks for your question. I'm very excited that my relationship with my dad is back on a good plane. This question comes from TikTok. You can find me on TikTok at Mikey on Mute, all one word. This one comes from Two Plants, that's PLANTZ. The question is, what was the last aha moment you had? Two Plants, I love this question. It's hard to pinpoint the exact last one, that kind of light bulb moment. They happen quite often for me, where things start to click and fall into place, whether I'm talking to my therapist or my wife or friends, family, and something just starts to fall into place. I think one of the last true aha moments that I had was working with my therapist on, I had brought up some things that were happening in my sleep that are not great and some worries I have there. But this was the first time I had talked to him about really, in detail what was going on in my sleep. And for him to be able to be like, yeah, this can definitely affect how your mental health is during the day if you're not getting the right kind of sleep and the amount of sleep and using the right sleep hygiene and all that. So it was just kind of an aha moment for some of my, what we spoke about, kind of like a hyper arousal of my nervous system, where I'm kind of always on edge during the day. Fight or flight is always activated. And talking about how at night that's supposed to shut off and how it hasn't been for me. And so it was just kind of like yeah, you're right. I should have brought this up sooner. I have some appointments coming up next month to kind of look at a few different things, hopefully get some answers. But the aha moment was talk about things that are happening, even if you think they may not be mental health related. Talking about them can start a conversation or start to connect the dots for you. A lot of the times we see physical health symptoms coming up before we see the mental health things. And it can really start to, connect the dots, show the full picture. Two Plants appreciate the question on that one. Again, on TikTok, we have Beckles. Beckles asks, what are some of your strengths or things you do well? There was a precede to this question about you talk a lot about things that you need to work on. And I try to make sure I have that accountability. So finding my strengths and things I do well is difficult for me. One thing I'm consistently working on is self-compassion and being nicer to myself. And so that would include showing myself these victories, allowing myself to congratulate myself on the wins. So I would say some of the strengths I've been able to do recently are I'm taking, curveballs that come into life in a little bit better of a way. It's not a 0 to 100 change, but when something comes up, taking a few moments and putting names to those emotions has been a big win for me lately. I've been able to separate that, I'm not the emotion. I can name it. It's happening and it's valid, but it's not who I am. So that's been a big win for me lately as well, to be able to say, hey, kind of separate who I am versus the emotion and go, okay. My therapist talks a lot about the hand and the face metaphor. So these emotions that we feel are like a hand in our face, and they make it really hard to see everything. And by naming our emotions and giving them space, holding space for them, not trying to get rid of them, but just saying, okay, right now I am feeling anxious. I notice that I feel anxious. And that takes it kind of the hand away from the face a little bit, where it's still there. The emotions are still there and they're still valid, but they're not blocking you from your view. They're not stopping you from being able to see other things happening around you. And that's kind of the win and way to kind of go about when these emotions happen. So that's definitely one of my strengths that I'm excited to share with you guys. Next, from TikTok, we have a few different questions from Willow. Willow, appreciate you. You've been a big supporter, whether that's on social media or reaching out, and I appreciate you helping, start the conversation. You're very good about asking questions. We have a few different ones from you. I'm going to try to get to them all here. The first one from Willow, what is your preferred polydynamic? So for those who might have missed previous episodes, I am polyamorous. I believe that love is not a finite resource, that we can love multiple people, and it doesn't take away from or lessen our love for the ones that we're already with. As long as everything is communicated, consented to, and done in a healthy way, I believe it is an option to do so. So my preferred polydynamic is what they would call kitchen table polyamory. And that's where all of the people in my life that I'm connected to in some way can come together. The whole metaphor is like sitting around the kitchen table, but that we can all interact and hang out together. And it doesn't have to be what they call like a parallel where everything is separate, which works for a lot of things. But I prefer more of a village feeling where it's kitchen table. Everyone can get along, and it doesn't mean you're dating, intertwined or anything like that, but just that there aren't barriers. I believe that the beauty of it is that it can be crafted however works for you. So again, that's just kind of how I prefer it and how I see it, but there are many, many ways to do it, as long as it's consented to and communicated. Willow's next question is, what do you think makes a relationship a healthy one? Great question, Willow, and I wish I could say that I had it all figured out, but I'm human. I struggle just like everybody else. I say a lot about the relationship with my wife that it's one of the healthiest I've ever been in, if not the healthiest. What makes a healthy relationship to me is based on a few things. Being able to communicate is a huge one, and that includes having tough conversations. Conversations we don't want to have because we, as people pleasers, don't like conflict. We don't think it's right to bring up issues. We tend to put, our partners on these pedestals and don't see anything wrong with them. So having conversations that show them as anything other than these perfect beings can be really hard for some of us, myself included. So communication and having those tough conversations that show you want to grow within that relationship, and then making a plan together. How can we grow together? What behaviors have to change in order to make this successful? And I think checking in with your partner, making sure wants and needs are met. If they're not being met, what can we do? Are we communicating this? How can we make this better? And really understanding the differences in our love languages. You can take the tests online. You can read the book about love languages. It's really good to get a conversation starter. What I will say is don't put yourself in a box just because, the online test or the book says you are one or two love language styles, that's the only way and all of that. Make sure you look at how they all can impact you and then prioritize what's most important to you at that point. If that love language priority changes, one takes, more of a precedent at some point, communicate that with your partner because nobody's a mind reader. So that to me, a healthy relationship is built on communication, tough conversations, understanding and talking through love languages, and then making sure we understand that no one is a mind reader, that we want to grow together. How can we plan and be a part of a team together here? There isn't gender roles. There isn't, you should be doing this because you are this, blah, blah, blah. Be a team. This is about tackling life. Life sucks and life is hard and can really throw a lot of things at you. So find someone that is willing to grow with you, laugh with you, get through it as a team, and, just continue to talk and make sure that we are on the same page. Because at some point, if we're not on the same page, resentment can start happening. If we're not talking, if we're keeping quiet, if we're being on mute about it, nothing's going to change. Willow's last question is, what's the toughest thing about talking about your feelings? Willow, that is a heavy question to end on there. So, I think for me, being vulnerable is really tough, which may seem odd considering I have a podcast where I talk to complete strangers about my mental health and emotions, but being vulnerable with the people I'm closest with can be really tough. Talking about things that have triggers for me and trying not to, for me personally, I'm trying not to make everything feel like it's an excuse. I want to talk about what's happened, but I've used it in the past so much for an excuse on how when I, acted shitty, I just blamed it on the mental illness and my mental health issues. And so I think I struggle with talking about it because I don't want to fall back into that old pattern of using it as some sort of excuse or reason that I did something that I shouldn't have. I think another tough thing with it can be, where do you start? A lot of people aren't sure, hey, do I start at the beginning of this current problem? Do I start where I think it may have come from? And that's going to change based on situation to situation. You got to find what works for you. Start with, some of the things that are currently bothering you. My therapist tells me all the time, don't worry too much about digging into the whys or understanding root causes. Our brains are problem solvers. They love root causes, but he tells me all the time, it doesn't really matter why. It's more so about what are we going to do about it going forward. Everybody, thank you for your questions here. This has been great. I look forward to doing another one of these Ask Me Anything episodes down the road, seeing how the questions can change. Nobody asked me about my favorite dinosaur, but I digress. Before we wrap up the episode, it's the holiday week. Whether you are celebrating Yule, whether you are celebrating Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, something else completely entirely that I am not privy to, whatever you're celebrating, I want to make sure you're in a good spot for it. What are some mental health things that we can do tip-wise to stay safe during this holiday season? Because whatever the holiday you celebrate is or don't celebrate, it can bring up a lot of emotions. There's a lot of feelings that come up. A lot of us that struggle with those should statements deal with that, trying to fit into the standards, and it can really be overwhelming. So here's just a couple tips. There's so many out there, but just a couple from me to you to help you get through this holiday season. Stay within and connected to your values, not perfectionism. What I mean is, going back to those should statements. No one's perfect. No one's going to nail it all on the first try. So stay within and connect to your values. What's important to you? What are some things that you live your life by? What are those values? That's how you want to handle the holiday season and every day. Schedule a worry time. I know that sounds weird, but schedule a worry time. Set a timer and allow your mind to wander during that time. Allow your mind to go in all the different paths it's going to worry about what's happening down the road or later today. And then, once that timer goes off, move on with your day. You gave those thoughts space. They're valid, but they're not going to run the day. By giving yourself this specific worry time, you're giving it, hey, I recognize you. You're important. But also, you're not going to dictate the rest of my day. You're not going to tell me how the rest of this week's going to go. Just keep it on a specific time. Practice mindfulness every day. Whether that's checking in on the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 practices we can do, or something like the alphabet game that I've talked about in the past. There are a bunch of mindfulness practices out there. Find what works for you. Take time every day, even if it's just 3 minutes of breathing techniques. Finally, seek help if it's needed. This is the holiday season. Mental health crises don't take a vacation because you're on vacation. Seek help. There's still resources out there. You have 988, the helpline, the suicide helpline. You have different organizations like NAMI, NAMI, and plenty more out there to support you during this. If you're not a big talker, there's places you can text. There are places you can visit, even during holiday hours. So please understand that if you need that help, it's okay to step away and get that help. Stepping away, maybe taking 5 minutes away from your family to understand that everything they're talking about right now is not in your values line. Also stepping away and making a call or a text, reaching out to your therapist or a trusted friend, someone that can hold space for you. It's really important to do. Again, these are just a few tips. I am so thankful to you guys for the support, for reaching out and commenting, the people I was able to shout out earlier. I can't put into words how incredible this group of podcasters has made me feel welcomed and accepted. And I'm so excited to bring you guys talks with other people. That's our next step here. I have a lot of conversations coming up. Again, if you know of anybody you want me to have a conversation with, please get them my information, comment their information to me, send it to me in a message. If you yourself want to talk to me, message me. I'm going to have a lot to get scheduled, but I'm so excited because the more conversations we have, the more we normalize this. However you want to run that conversation, we'll make it happen. So I very much look forward to breaking all the stigmas I can and helping you guys talk about your stories and celebrate your victories, because this isn't just about my victories. This is about our victories in life. And let's tell our story and let's understand that sometimes life sucks. Sometimes that's just the end periods of that sentence, and hey, we move on. We've made it through 100% of our bad days. 100% of them. I've never really done 100% on much of anything in life, so to be able to do that is huge. I have survived 100% of my bad days, and so have you. And the world's better because you exist in it. So please reach out. Let's have these conversations. And before I go off to see what presents I need to get wrapped and what else I need to do to get the holidays going here, this is Mikey going back on mute. Until next time. This episode of Mikey on Mute is brought to you by Dubby Energy. Dubby is a clean energy drink loaded with vitamins and nootropics. Dubby is sugar-free, has 0 calories, and 0 artificial coloring. Use promo code MikeyOnMute to save 10% on your order at dubby.gg. That's DUBBY.gg. And remember, promo code MikeyOnMute, all one word, will save you 10%.